Around 3,200 years ago, in a single lifetime, every superpower on Earth burned. Except one. The Hittite Empire, erased. Mycenaean Greece, the world of Troy and Agamemnon, erased. The richest trade cities of the coast, burned with their people inside. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse. It hit so hard that entire regions forgot how to read and write. Not for a decade, for 400 years. And in the ruins, the survivors kept writing down the same words. They came from the sea. So who were they? And why did only one empire on Earth survive them? The answer survives in two places, carved on a temple wall in Egypt by the pharaoh who fought them, and baked into a clay letter that was never sent by a king who did not. First, understand what was about to die. The world of 1200 BC was not primitive. It was globalized. 5 great powers, bound together by trade, treaties, and royal marriages. We still have their letters. The kings of Egypt, Hatti, Babylon, and Mycenae wrote to each other constantly, and they called each other brother. It was a club of superpowers, and the whole system ran on one material, bronze, every sword, every plow, every chariot fitting. And here is the catch. Bronze is copper plus tin, and tin was a problem. The copper came from Cyprus. But most of the tin came from mines as far as modern Afghanistan. Thousands of kilometers away, the mightiest empires on Earth depended on a supply line thinner than a thread. We found the proof at the bottom of the sea. One sunken ship from this era carried 10 tons of copper, a ton of tin, ebony from Africa, amber from the Baltic. One ship carrying the whole world in its belly. Remember that. A sword in Greece existed because mines in Central Asia, ships in Lebanon, and smelters in Cyprus all worked on schedule. It was the most connected the world had ever been, and Egypt sat on top of it all. 8 centuries after the drought that killed the Old Kingdom, the story from our last video, Egypt had risen again, richer than the pyramid builders ever were. This was the empire of Ramesses the Great. Then the warning signs began. Hittite harvests failed. Their king wrote to Egypt begging for grain, and Egypt actually sent emergency shipments north. Superpowers do not beg, unless something is very wrong. Then, around 1207 BC, Pharaoh Meneptah faced something new. Invaders from Libya, joined by fighters with names Egypt had never written before. The Shurden, the Shekelesh. Peoples, the scribes said, of the sea. Egypt won that first battle, but the strange names kept coming back, and in the letters between the great kings, the tone was changing. Less brotherhood, more fear. And then, around 1200 BC, the fires began. Not one city, not one war. Across the entire eastern Mediterranean, city after city goes up in flame within a few decades. The question is why? Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire, superpower for 4 centuries, was burned and abandoned. Forever. No one even rebuilt on the ruins. An empire of millions simply stopped existing. In Greece, the palaces of Mycenae fell, and with them, writing itself. The Greeks lost their script and would stay illiterate for 4 centuries. The age of heroes ended in ash and silence. To feel the collapse as the people lived it, go to Ugarit, the richest port of the age. Its last king, Amurapi, sat in his palace writing a desperate letter to the king of Cyprus. "My father," he wrote, "the enemy ships have come. They have been setting fire to my cities. Does not my father know that all my troops are gone? The 7 ships that came here did us much harm." That letter was found in the ruins, thousands of years later. It was never sent. Ugarit fell before the clay was even delivered. Archaeologists found arrowheads in its streets. The city never rose again. So who was doing this? The Egyptians wrote down their names, the Peleset, the Cheka, the Denian, the Weshesh, the Shekelesh. Names from nowhere, nations without an address. Historians have hunted them for 2 centuries. Were the Shurden from Sardinia, the Shekelesh from Sicily, refugees from collapsing Greece, from Anatolia? The truth is, we still cannot fully name them. But the Egyptian carvings show one detail that changes everything. Behind the warriors came ox carts, loaded with furniture, with women, with children. This was not an army on campaign. This was entire peoples moving. And whole peoples do not abandon their homelands for fun. Something pushed them. The answer came, once again, from mud. The same kind of evidence that solved Egypt's first collapse in our last story. Pollen cores from the Sea of Galilee tell the story. Around 1200 BC, the trees begin to vanish. A brutal drought gripped the eastern Mediterranean, and it held on for decades. The tablets confirm it. Hittite letters beg for grain to save lives. In one Syrian city, parents recorded selling their own children because there was nothing left to feed them. Sound familiar? It should. The killer from our last video had returned. Drought, but this time it attacked a different world, a connected world. And connection, it turns out, is a double-edged sword. Watch the cascade. Famine empties the countryside. Hungry people take to the sea. Raiders cut the trade routes. No trade, no tin, no tin, no bronze, no bronze, no army. No army, the next city falls, and its survivors join the wave, which finally answers who the sea peoples were. Not an evil empire, not a master plan. They were the collapse itself, walking. Refugees of burned cities, sailors without ports, farmers without rain. Victims who became the weapon. And by 1180 BC, the wave had swallowed everything in its path. Only one great light was left burning on the map, Egypt, and the wave turned south toward it. On the throne sat Ramesses III. He had read the reports, Hatti gone, Cyprus overrun, Ugarit ash. He was the last great king of the Bronze Age, and he knew exactly what was coming for him. His scouts tracked the coalition massing in the north. His scribes carved the intelligence into stone. No land could stand before their arms, the wall says. Hatti, Kode, Carchemish, Al-Ashir, all cut down. The list reads like a world ending. But Ramesses had two things no fallen empire had: time to prepare, and the Nile Delta, a maze of narrow channels and reed banks. If the sea was their highway, he would turn his river into a trap. The first blow came by land. In Syria-Palestine, at a place the Egyptians called Jahi, the pharaoh's infantry and chariots crashed into the migrating column and stopped it cold. Then came the fleet. Around 1177 BC, the sea ships entered the delta mouths, and Egypt let them come in. Deeper and deeper, into channels with no room to turn. Then the banks came alive. Massed archers fired volley after volley into the packed decks. Egyptian ships rammed from the channels, grappled the enemy hulls, and capsized them. The highway of the sea peoples became a killing pool. The whole battle is carved at Medinet Habu, the only great naval battle recorded from the entire Bronze Age. Capsized ships, drowning invaders, rows of bound captives, and the pharaoh towering over all of it. Egypt won, the only superpower on earth that stood in the path of the wave and stopped it. The pharaoh declared the invaders crushed like sparrows. But victory has a price tag, and Egypt was about to read it. Why did Egypt survive when everyone else fell? Geography. The delta was a fortress no fleet could rush. Grain. The Nile still fed the state when rain-fed empires starved. And a machine. One king, one army, one command. The lesson of the first collapse, learned. The survivors got a very Egyptian ending. Many captured Shurden warriors were drafted straight into the pharaoh's own guard. Yesterday's apocalypse, today's payroll. Egypt did not just defeat the wave, it hired it. But the war had drained the treasury dry. In year 29 of Ramesses III, the ration deliveries to the royal tomb builders started arriving late. Then not at all. So the craftsmen did something no one had ever done before. They put down their tools, marched to the temple, sat down and said, "We are hungry." It is the first labor strike recorded in human history. The heirs of the pyramid builders from our first story still demanding their wages. And the rot reached the palace itself. Inside the royal harem, a secondary wife plotted to murder Ramesses and put her own son on the throne. Court officials joined, even army officers. We know because the trial records survive. And in 2012, scientists put the pharaoh's mummy through a CT scanner. His throat had been cut to the bone. The king who stopped the end of the world was killed by his own household. After him, Egypt let go of its empire. The territories in Asia, gone. The gold mines contested. The state that had projected power for centuries pulled back inside its river and closed the gates. Egypt survived the apocalypse. It just stopped mattering outside its own borders. Around it, the lights stayed out. Trade shrank to villages, kings vanished, populations crashed. Historians call the next century and a half a dark age, and for once, the name is not an exaggeration. But in the ashes, two revolutions quietly began. Iron, made from ore found almost everywhere, replaced bronze and its fragile tin supply line forever. And a simple alphabet of a few dozen letters began to replace the palace scripts. Reading would never again belong only to kings, and the sea peoples themselves. One group, the Peliset, settled on the coast of Canaan. The Bible remembers them by another name, the Philistines. Goliath, the giant of the famous story, may have been the great-grandson of refugees from the collapse. And so the Bronze Age ended, not with one battle, but with a world quietly getting smaller. On the Nile, life went on. Smaller, poorer, but alive. Which brings us back to the question we started with. Who ended the civilized world? No one. And everyone. A drought that broke the harvests. Refugees the system created and could not absorb. Supply lines too fragile to survive fear and too essential to live without. The sea peoples were not the cause of the collapse. They were its face. And Egypt survived because its river, its granaries, and its single unbroken command were the one machine the wave could not break. And that is the terrifying part. Alone, each empire might have survived a drought. Together, bound by trade into one system, they fell as one. The connections that made the Bronze Age brilliant are exactly what made it collapse. Strength and fragility were the same thing. If that sounds familiar, it should. Our tin from Afghanistan is now microchips from a single island. Our grain ships still cross the same seas. We rebuilt the Bronze Age system, planet-sized. The people of 1200 BC also believed their world was too connected to fail. But remember the other half of the story. The collapse killed palaces, not people's ingenuity. It gave the world cheap iron and the alphabet. Sometimes the end of an old system is the only way a new one gets born. Today you can still stand at Medinet Habu and read the whole story in stone. The ships, the ox carts, the captives, the last great king of the Bronze Age, frozen mid-victory, a monument to winning everything and keeping almost none of it. So Egypt survived its second death, the death that took everyone else. It would stand for another 1,000 years. But its third death was already written. And this one would not come from the sky or the sea. It would come speaking Greek and marching under Roman eagles, because the last pharaoh of Egypt was not even Egyptian. She was Greek, she was brilliant, and she bet the entire 3,000-year-old kingdom on one desperate gamble against Rome. Her name was Cleopatra. That story is next. Subscribe so you do not miss the final death of ancient Egypt and the queen who almost saved it.